So the first real thing that we're going to do is make sure that the inputs are reasonable. That mainly involves the number of students. There's a few things we do not expect the number of students to be. Probably shouldn't be less than 2. It's a pretty boring game. It doesn't even make any sense. 1 student, 1 box, open half a box, enjoy. In fact, it doesn't really make much sense for the number of students to be odd either. So we should probably reject that case as well. And we will also basically want to show this error to the user if it happens rather than running the code. So let's actually do that now. Let's start with the too few students error. I'm going to go into my HTML and add one more paragraph, and that's going to be my error text. So error, you have messed up. I'm going to put a span here again, ID equals error text. And we're going to say, just close span for now. I'm not going to put anything in it to start with. And, it'd be nice if error text were actually read. So let's do, and remember the hashtag error text is a way of selecting something by ID in the HTML. So hashtag error text selects anything, i.e. only one thing at most, with the ID of error text. And I say color red. Now, if I typed a few things in here, like ABC, you'll see that indeed the error is red. And bold, by the way, because this is a span tag and the font weight bold does apply. But the color blue is overridden by the color red because error text happens to be more specific than just a tag reference. All right. So all that said and done, we actually don't want to set that here in HTML. We want to set it down here in the run function if the number of students is less than 2. So I'm going to come down here and add some lines in between my wins tag dot inner HTML equals num students. I'm just going to leave that in there so that we can tell when the run button's working. And I'm going to put an if statement in here. If, and if you recall, you always need the brackets again around your condition. If the num students variable is less than 2, curly braces says what to do in that case. Well, what I really want is I want to set the error text to be, bad. You can't make students less than 2. Well, I should probably get the error text tag just like I did with my other output here. So I'm going to come back up here and say const error text tag equals document.get element by ID error text. Oops. Again, this error text here matches this error text. That's important because otherwise document.get element by ID isn't going to work. It goes and looks for the ID and doesn't find it. And then this is any kind of text I want the variable to be named. And again, I'm saying the variable itself, error text tag, will never point at something else. It'll always point at the error text tag, HTML tag. All right, now I can do the same thing I did before with my wins tag down here. I can say error text tag dot inner HTML equals bad. Let's do something really simple and just make sure it works first. I'm going to save that and click run. No error. That's great. Even 2 is not less than 2, right? That works great. If I set this to 1, bad. Oh no. Notice my text does appear. It's automatically read because it's highlighted here by CSS. And I actually ran this code because number of students is now less than 2. So the inner HTML of error text tag was set to bad. Now, there's a couple problems here. If I set this back to 2, notice bad still stays showing up. That's because I never actually blanked it out to begin with, right? I could put an else case in here. I could also just at the beginning of the function here just say error text tag dot inner HTML equals nothing. That way, at least it sets the error text back to empty always, and then only sets it to something again later on if there actually is an error. So now if I say 1, run, and I get bad, and then I say 2 again, because the function automatically blanks it out and then it never runs this code down here. Well, it runs this code to check the if condition, but it never then runs this code inside the if condition. Then error text tag is always just the empty string on the inside of the HTML, and we're good. So that's our first error condition. Now I probably want to make this say something a little bit more interesting, right? Like maybe, I don't know, number of students can't be less than 2. That's probably a nicer error message, right? So now if I set this to 1, I actually know what I did wrong. There's one more problem that probably isn't apparent yet, but we probably don't want to actually set the wins text to anything at all if there's an error. Right now, we're just setting it to the number of students down here at the bottom, but that's clearly going to eventually be run some code and then set it to the actual number of wins. We shouldn't run any of that code if there's an error. So I'm going to go into my JavaScript code and at the bottom of the if curly braces say return. This just says stop, return from the function like we had learned last time, stop running any other code inside that function. So now what this does is if I change this to 2 and click run, it sets wins to 2, but if I set it to 1, notice it doesn't update wins anymore. That might make it quite what we want, but at the same time, at least it isn't going to be running any additional code afterwards to try to use the number 1 in the game. Now, there's a few other annoyances here that we're just going to fix real quick while we're in here. One thing is, if you save this CodePen, or if you change something down here, just so I can get it to refresh the screen, ABC. Notice that error always shows up. That could be mildly annoying. I'm going to delete my comment here. That's what that is. It's code that the JavaScript completely ignores. So I'm going to actually put an ID on this entire paragraph and hide it if there is no error. That'll look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to call this ID error itself. And then I'm going to come in here, and by default, I'm going to hide error. Remember that the display none is how we do that. The opposite, the standard of the display would be block. Inline was another kind for span tags, but basically we usually switch this for like div tags or paragraph tags between block and none to show it or hide it. Notice error is gone now. And if we run number of students 2, all is well. If we run it with number of 1, it doesn't show up yet because we didn't tell it to, right? So we're setting the error text, and notice it didn't update wins. So it's doing the right thing. It's just we didn't actually unhide error. That's fine. We can do that in here. So in addition to setting the inner HTML, we also say error tag dot inner HTML, which I need to define. But I'm just going to say kind of what I want to happen here. Not inner HTML. Dot style. Dot display equals block. And up here, I need an error tag variable, right? Const error tag equals document.get element by ID. And then error, right? Semicolon at the end. That will grab this entire paragraph tag, shove it in error tag, and then here I can say error tag.style. If you recall from last time, that's how we set the style of a HTML tag. And then we say .display equals block. That will show it. Now, let's run this. We'll see we have the same problem as we had before when we didn't blank out our error text. Let's show what that looks like. 2, great. 1, yay, I can see it. I go back to like 4, and notice error is still shown. That's because at the beginning, I didn't also hide it again. So to fix that, I'm going to say error tag.style.display equals none. So this is a pretty common pattern. I'm just going to highlight it one more time because it comes up a lot. In your CSS, you're going to be setting styles like hidden or whatever colors, etc. You're going to be setting things like hidden, though, that are going to change in your code to the default when the program first loads. That's why when it refreshes the page for the very first time, I don't see errors at all, even before I've hit the run button. But inside the run button, I might be hitting the run button multiple times while this page is displayed. And so I need to always set the initial conditions in my run function to be the way things should be if all is well. So I could delete this line now. It doesn't really matter if inner HTML is set to something different if I'm going to hide the whole thing anyway. But I'll leave it. It's cleaner. But the idea is I blank out the error message. I hide the error tag. So that's the default. When I hit run, I assume there's no error. I blank all the error stuff out, make it hidden. And then only if I run into an error do I actually set the tags, set the inner HTML of the error text tag to be the error message, and then show the entire error tag to begin with. So that's what I'm doing down here. And if there's any other error messages, I'll do the same thing. Let's see a second error message right now, just so we can make sure this all makes sense. I also need the number of students to be even, right? If it's odd, that's bad. So I also have another if condition down here. If num students. Now, how do I determine if something's even or not? If you recall from last time, there's this percent operator that does division and gets you the remainder. So what this says is divide number of students by 2 and then give me the remainder. So if I divide 3, let's say number of students by 2 and get the remainder is 1, right? If you do the little division box and 2 into 3, you get it going in one time, and then you subtract the 2 and you get 1 left, and it's 1 remainder 1. If it was 5 students and I divide it by 2, I get 2 remainder 1. Any odd number when I divide it by 2 is going to have a remainder of 1. That's kind of the definition of an odd number. If you'll notice, right, an even number is evenly divisible by 2. So if I divide it by 2, the remainder will always come out to be 0. So that's the key. If a number is odd, division by 2 will give remainder 1. If it's even, division by 2 will give remainder 0. I can't just say divide, though, because that would give me the actual quotient, right? That would give me the 2 part before the remainder 1, or the 3 remainder whatever. So the percent sign in most computer languages is how you say divide and then give me the remainder instead of the division itself. Okay, and recall that equals in if conditions, when you're testing for equals rather than setting something to be equals, is a double equals sign. So this says test that this is equal to 1. So if number of students %2 is equal to 1, then now we have an error again. Error text tag dot inner HTML number of students must be even. Semicolon. Now I need to also show error tag here, .style.display equals block. And I'm going to return because I don't want to do anything else in these error conditions, right? Like, just you have bad input, try again. Return. So let's try this now. So if I go up here and type in 4, everything works. If I type in 1, bad things happen and it does not update wins. If I get it up back to 2, all is well. If I go to 3 now, excellent. We don't update wins. Number of students must be even. So it actually does know the right thing to do. Now notice order here did matter in the code, right? Number of students being 1 is both less than 2 and odd. So how did it know which error to display? whichever one we put first. If number of students is less than 2 is first. It runs this and returns. It never tries this. If we didn't return, then it would run this. 1 would also match, and it would immediately update the text to say number of students must be even. So that's another good reason to have returns in there. Let's just return the first error we get to. The person can fix that, and then, you know, they might hit other error messages if they accidentally type in an odd number that's bigger than 2. So those are our 2 error messages we're going to do for now, but that's how we can do error handling. There's just one more piece I want to solve right now, which is this annoying repetition that we do. We can do a little bit better with custom functions. Now, this is not really necessary if I just have 2 error conditions, but you can see that this gets kind of laborious if I had a bunch of error conditions. And it's sometimes nice, instead of seeing these 2 random things, to see just a single function call saying what we want to do. So let's make a hide error and show error function. I'm going to scroll back up here. I'm going to insert them above here. Function hide error. Some curly braces in there. It doesn't do anything yet. I'm going to add the show error function too. Curly braces. And the idea is I want to actually just call hide error at the top of my run function, and then just call show error with this text given. And I want show error function to do these 2 things for me. Hide error should do these 2 things for me. Whoops, sorry, these 2 things for me. So let's do that now. I'm going to cut these out and put them in hide error and call hide error here instead. Right? So this says go run the hide error function. It goes up here and says, okay, set error text tag inner HTML equal that. Error tag.style.display equals none. This won't quite work because these variables are defined in here rather than up here. I can fix that. I can just move these variables to be defined elsewhere. I'll keep them for the moment in here, just to show you that this can actually work just fine. And then I'm going to run this and just show that it works. So if I click 2, I get that, which is great. Click 1. Oh no, badness. What happened? And it's saying error text tag is not defined. I shouldn't have cut it because we're still using it here. So I'm going to actually copy this and put it back so that my show errors can still work. Let's try that now. 2 works. 1, yes, that now works. Number of students can't be less than 2. Because yeah, error text tag, I had removed my variables from here, so that was bad. Same with 3. 3 still works. 4 should blank out everything and update wins to 4 like last time, so that's all working. So now let's make our show error function. Now here's where I can actually move things. I won't need my error text tag anymore once I have hide error and show error. Run will just call one of those 2 functions and we'll never need to deal with these variables directly. All right, that's fine. I'm going to actually move them this time in here. And then show error is a little interesting. If I just cut this right now and paste it in here, and then call show error here, which is what I wanted last time, like when I called hide error, just, you know, replace these lines of code with a function call that does those lines of code. Notice, however, that this text is always number of students can't be less than 2. That's not quite what I want. I want the text to change depending on which error I want to show. So I need to make a variable in my function called text. In this case, I'm just going to name it something boring. I'm going to cut this string and just say text instead here. So basically, whatever somebody passes into the show error function is what I'm going to set the error message to. That's the variable for this function. What is the error text? It could be different each time I call the function. So down here, I'm just going to paste that is the error message I want to show. What this does is if the number of students is less than 2, it just calls the show error function that I made up for me with this error text message. So this gets shoved into text. And down here, it just makes the two variables, sets the inner HTML of the error text tag to text, which in this case will be this string. Number of students can't be less than 2. And then it just makes the error tag itself, this thing right here, show up with a .style.display equals block. Let's see this work. 2, yay, 4 or 3. That still does not work because I need to actually replace this stuff. I'm still using this variable. I keep wanting to get rid of this variable in this function and I keep messing up. Let's update this as well to show error. And I'm just going to pass it in this error message, right? And it's going to run those 2 lines of code. They're the same 2 lines of code. The error message was just different. So either way, I want to run these 2 lines of code up here. It just the text changes each time. So now I'm passing in 2 different texts depending on the error case. Okay, let's try that one more time. Number of students, 2. Yay. Number of students, 3. Woohoo. Number of students must be even. It does get that right. 4 goes back to not showing the error text. 1, number of students can't be less than 2. So this is just simply a bit nicer of a way to show errors without having to copy and paste a lot of text around. Yes, it was just a couple lines, but now if we add more error conditions, we can just say show error in some text and it just magically does the right thing. We always have our hide error function up here that we call that just immediately hides things at the beginning of the pressing the run button so that we set back into a good state. There is even the normal thing to do would be to call hide error. This is unnecessary here, but you can actually call hide error outside of any function and that will run it at the very beginning when your page loads. All that would do for me is mean that I don't have to have these 3 lines in my CSS. Even if I remove this now, the default is this code will run right here when the page loads, and it will actually run my hide error function. Just to recall from last time, function hide error just defines a function but doesn't actually run it. When I call it down here, that's when it runs it. And all of this code is loaded when the page is loaded. So by calling hide error here, it actually hides error tag style.display equals none is how it does that, which makes this redundant. I'm already now setting the display to none at the page load when this function runs. Now, there's a little bit of a delay when the JavaScript runs versus when the CSS is loaded. That can cause a flicker for a second. So actually, the preference is usually to set it in CSS or just to hide the entire page until you've run your JavaScript. There's various ways to do this. So for our purposes, we don't care too much. You can go either way. You can set it in CSS. You can run the hide error function. You can do both. That's fine. I'm just going to do the CSS style for now. It's simple enough, and the hide error function isn't doing too much. Now, one last cleanup. Notice there's some duplication here. I have const error text tag, const error tag in both of these functions. Sorry, here and here. This is actually fine as is. It's okay to have this duplication. The other way to do this is to have some global variables that sit outside of the function. So I can actually move these out here and make these functions a bit shorter because now they can both use the same 2 lines. This says error text tag and error tag are defined here, and that both of these functions can now use those variables. Some people prefer to have them inside the function so that no other functions can touch them. Other people don't care, especially if your JavaScript file is not that big. Having them globally reduces a few lines of code. our file isn't going to be that big. I'm going to keep them outside as global variables that just any function can access. However, really, I only intend to access them from these two functions. In larger setups where you want to actually be careful about who can touch what variables in terms of your functions and just not accidentally setting error text in some completely different function that you didn't mean to, it's fine to include them and duplicate them in the two functions that happen to need these two things. So just as an FYI, this is slightly cleaner for our purposes, but it could actually be cleaner the other way if you want to protect use of these variables in other functions.